to Nuked Radio. This is episode 39. Today is Tuesday, June the 12th, 2012. I'm your host, Christina Consolo, and with me today is Jules and Kurt from Room 101, who's going to play some clips for us. Hey, guys.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Christina. How are you?
Good. Still a little tired. We took a ride out to South Bend, Indiana over the weekend to see what was going on there. And when I came back, someone had sent me this video that ran on the news. Here's an example of mainstream media crossover with YouTube. This is from WSBT.
Radiation risk in South Bend. Tonight, our WSBT fact finders get to the bottom of it.
Some of you were really concerned about this morning. Lots of emails and phone calls into the newsroom. Radiation Network, which keeps an eye on counts across the country, issued a reading that radiation levels in South Bend were at a catastrophic level. Turns out it was a mistake. WSBT's fact finder John Paul is here. And John, you learned some equipment malfunction.
Yeah, Dustin, we talked to the owner of Radiation Network. He told us it was a false alarm, and he has no idea what caused it.
We use some form of radiation almost every day. We count on it for medicine, sciences, communication, and cooking. Too much, though, is a bad thing. In fact, it's dangerous.
Hey, YouTube, this is Itchy, and we have a possible alert for the area of South Bend, Indiana.
Radiation Network, which keeps an eye on counts across the country, issued a reading that radiation levels here were at a catastrophic level. That got people's attention.
After that first call, another woman calls saying she lives in Texas and she tracks it and she's wondering what's going on there.
Nearly a dozen people called and emailed WSBT News producer Ashley Henderson, most of them worried.
I'm really the only person here doing the show, so there's not a whole lot I can do footwork-wise to figure this out. And he said, well, you can't wait that long. This is an emergency. Like, you can't wait to see what's going on.
The wind direction would be coming right from Palisades.
Turns out it was all a mistake, and the fact finder team knows why. We called the Environmental Protection Agency and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. People there told us there's no indication from their inspectors that there's been a radiation release. Nothing appears out of the ordinary. Our next call was to the owner of Mineral Lab, the company that runs Radiation Network. He told us it was a false alarm. Quote, my apologies to all. I have no idea what caused this. The alert level reading last evening appears to be a false alert from an equipment malfunction.
Interesting warning for you.
It was.
And a spokesperson from the EPA told us Radiation Network's information does not feature EPA data. All of their readings came back normal.
So what is the Radiation Network, and how did one of its trackers end up here?
Well, the company owns and operates all of their software and equipment, and people like you and me, we can actually buy it, and then we are actually part of their network. Now, just to give you an idea on how far-reaching this equipment is, someone in Texas actually called our newsroom this morning, again, worried about what was happening here, and she's like, hey, you know, is everything okay there? And Ashley was just like, yeah, as far as I know. So, yeah, definitely
Catastrophic levels,
morning.
I'm not sure we'd have been answering.
Yeah, I know, right?
Thank
So
you,
true.
John.
So anyway, I did a 2-hour interview with Rupert Madison of End the Lie on Sunday night when we got back. If you want every little detail of what we saw when we were down there, you can listen to that. Basically, did Indiana get nuked or not? If there was an acute event, it seems to be over. I didn't record anything over 3.5 times background on the entire trip. We did see military helicopters around midnight on Sunday. There were some bright flashes and booms over Lake Michigan that night, right around the time we saw the helicopters. A little more concerning was there was a loud rumbling inland on Sunday afternoon, and it did not correspond to any seismic events, from what I could tell in that area, although one of the recorders in Grayling, Michigan has been taken offline. There were, however, signs of possible contamination due to some of the plant morphology that we saw, especially in the dunes right along Lake Michigan. And there's a plant called a spiderwort, which is also known as nature's Geiger counter. And not only did these plants demonstrate a color change to their flower, which they do in situations of ambient ionizing radiation, but they were mutated. They were fasciated along the top, and we posted some pictures of those. We have a lot more that I'll probably be putting up later today. A Potter blog also released a video yesterday, and I wanted to play his video, but it's so technical, I had a hard time following it, even watching with the graphs. So I would highly recommend that you do watch it. It's 27 minutes long. It's called Data Shows Highly Radioactive Field Saturated Geiger Counter in South Bend, Indiana. He gives some very compelling information how the readings on the graph don't necessarily correspond to the message that was left on the Radiation Network's page. And that is when the guy referred to unplugging the Geiger and plugging it back in. That's not showing up on any of the graphs. And there were some other, even more important topics listed towards the end of the video. I believe it's around 21 minutes, where he talks about what do we do if this happens again? And some of the more obvious things were that we need to have valid points about the information in terms of where the location is, at least within a 5-mile radius. So a geographic analysis can be determined, such as, is the Geiger in a valley? Is it up on a hill? What exactly was going on there in terms of rain? And there was something in South Bend that night going on with the wind. From 11:30 to 4 a.m., the wind was completely stopped. And that's when the fallout occurred. And as soon as the wind picked up again, around 4:30, that's when the numbers dropped. So please watch that and see what you think. Regardless of what happened last week, if there was an acute event, it seems to be over with now, so that's good. It was a big relief to see that the numbers were only really in the post-Fukushima range that I'm used to seeing around the Detroit area. There are also a couple things listed on that I would have included in the nuke report yesterday, but there just isn't enough time. At the Davis-Besse plant in Ohio over the weekend, a radioactive coolant leak was discovered. The plant is still in hot shutdown from what I can determine while they fix the leak. And this case has been documented in the corrective action program at Davis-Besse. At Diablo Canyon, both trains of an overpressure system were declared inoperable. This happened to them about a month ago, too. This was caused by a human performance error this time, in their estimation. And also at the Columbia Generating Station in Washington State, there was a major loss of emergency assessment capability. The NRC report states that the resulting condition could have impacted the ability to accurately assess ongoing releases and determine appropriate protective measures for the public. Please contact your local news if you live near this site to cover that story. And there are a few events on there also about fitness for duty problems. Again. So the NRC event notification page is updated every day during the week. You can go directly to that page and scroll through. Not only will you see the nuke plant problems listed there, but any problems that they had in medical facilities using radioactive isotopes. There were a few reports of seeds that are used, I believe, for bladder cancer or prostate cancer, where some of the seeds were lost during the procedure. That's kind of interesting. I haven't seen it before, but it showed up 3 times yesterday. And we're going to be hearing a lot more news about Fukushima. The Wall Street Journal has decided to start a Fukushima watch. And this was posted on Any News this morning. For juicy details lurking in reporters' notebooks, readers are obsessed with the topic. So it's good to see they're jumping on the bandwagon. They're a little bit behind the rest of us here. There's some great interviews that came out this weekend, too, with Arnie Gundersen and Dr. John Apsley. We're going to play some portions of those when we come back. You're listening to Nuked Radio.
You should learn how to say no.
welcome back. I want to thank everyone on the Radchick page and on YouTube who sent me information over the weekend about things that they were hearing, things to pay attention to in the South Bend area. It was very helpful when we could get online to have some of that information and not have to search for it. But we did have a lot of connection problems. The cell service and internet over there was terrible. And we had planned on Ustreaming the entire time, and we just couldn't do it for that reason and because we had too much to carry. You know, when you're walking through the woods and you have your Geiger counter and you have a video camera and then your cell phone and your gear and you're climbing dunes and taking pictures, like I almost needed a helmet cam like they have on, what was it, Fear Factor, when they have that as you're walking, you can see what everybody's doing. So we weren't quite as, it didn't work out the way we'd planned, but really appreciate all the helpful info that everyone sent us. Just in the last week, we've reached 41,238 people through the Radchick page by people sharing posts, especially the forecasts. So please continue to do that. Between the tuna fish story, the Indiana situation, and some of the debris field news, this is all helping the mass awakening to Fukushima. And Arnie Gundersen gave a wonderful interview on Coast to Coast over the weekend. It's 2.5 hours long, and I want to play a few excerpts from that. In this one, he's going to be talking about the radioactive tuna.
Mainstream media, except for little things like the boxcar-sized dock, 70-foot-long dock, drifted thousands of miles across the Pacific and ended up on an Oregon beach. And the environmentalists are saying, it's got little creatures from over there, which could pose a threat to creatures over here. 15 bluefin tunas, all were found to have radioactive cesium in them. Now, nobody said whether they were safe to eat or not, but I'm assuming that no cesium is good cesium in one's diet. So tell us where you are on all of this, and perhaps you can enlighten us as to why the entire mainstream media seems to be mum on this subject.
Well, I absolutely agree with you that mainstream media is mum on the topic. The bluefin tuna is the most frightening information in the recent month or so. That tuna was caught 5 months after the accident. So it was caught in August of last year. But the researchers didn't publish it. They wanted to wait until the data was published before they warned us. But that tuna spawned in Japan and then immediately started heading toward the U.S. So it didn't stay in that high radiation field very long, and still when it hit here, you're right. It had both cesium-134 and 137 in it. That means it's a Fukushima signature,
Yes.
and no cesium is good cesium.
Well, so that thing, I did not know that until this moment. It was caught 5 months after the March 11th accident, and we're just now hearing about it.
Right, and it likely only was in Japanese waters for around a month after the accident, and then the last 4 months was swimming across the ocean and growing. So, had it been caught off of Japan, the concentration of cesium would be a lot higher because there's a lot less mass as it swam across the ocean. It ate a little bit more as it came.
Yeah, and one of them that they had tagged, I don't know how they did that or what was the motivation, but apparently it made 2 round trips in 600 days. These tuna,
they went 15 for 15. Every tuna they caught had cesium. This isn't just a single tuna. They tested 15, and all 15 tested positive. So that basically means that every tuna in the Pacific now is carrying cesium-134 and 137. So I think that number is going to go up. I think that the concentrations of cesium are going to grow up over the next couple of years. This is not a one-time occurrence, I don't believe.
And no one has really established any, I don't know of them, any acceptable levels for radiation-contaminated or radioactively contaminated food, because there's just no way to know. It will affect different people differently. Just there are supposed to be 14, they estimated 14. Now, again, this is a news release from some time ago, but 14,000 extra deaths, human beings 1 year and younger, little kids. So some people will be able to withstand it, and others will not. And that's just kind of how it is when you're playing with nuclear radiation, isn't it?
Yeah, there's this thing called linear no threshold. And the more you get, the worse it is. But there is no number below which you're safe. And, I think that's what this tuna is showing us. That first off, it's going up. I'm firmly convinced that when somebody else steps forward now and publishes, we're going to see higher numbers than what was already detected. And second, there is no de minimis number below which you're safe.
Okay, so, well, now there's just been a piece of, the people in Japan are like, don't turn those back on. We just as soon go back to sticks and stones as be wiped out, have the entire nation wiped out by this accident. But I understand the government is saying we're going to have to turn them back on because leaving them off is a society-threatening issue. They don't have very many other energy sources, and they're scrambling to get all the what we used to call fossil fuel, all the combustibles that they possibly can now. I mean, they are in pretty serious trouble.
You said it at the beginning of the hour. They put 54 nuclear units in likely the worst location in the world as far as earthquakes go, tsunamis go. I was in Japan. I wrote a book in Japanese on the book tour, and the plants are built right on the ocean, and right behind them, mountains just take right off. There's very little habitable land in Japan, and so you've got high concentrations of people, high concentrations of earthquakes, and high concentrations of nuclear plants, and they just don't go together. So I can understand where the Japanese are really concerned about starting these things back up again. It's interesting because it's being led by mothers, which women, which traditionally in the Japanese culture is this is a unique experience that women are stepping up and saying, hell no, we won't go. It's a real change politically.
We were going to have. Arnie, we were going to have a nuclear engineering professor. He's in the University of California system. I must not say his name, nor which of the universities in California, because it's a pretty big system, but whichever one it is, they study nuclear engineering. You can narrow it from there. And he was very reticent to, at first, and then I thought, I don't think he's going to do it. So a friend of mine who made this introduction, he eventually said, well, first it was graduation, then he was going to be traveling, and then it was like, I think I'm going to have to bow out of this one. How much pressure do you think is on the professional community, whether it's in academia or whether it is in the actual nuclear industry, to keep quiet? How many billions of dollars are at stake if the people decide we don't want this, turn it off?
Yeah, there's an enormous amount of money that's going into educational facilities.
And we are back. We're going to listen to Arnie talk now about whether or not the debris field is going to be radioactive. He is also asked, was Fukushima done on purpose? Listen closely how he answers that question. He'll also mention the worst case scenario of Reactor 4 and what China syndrome is.
I wanted to ask you, is it your opinion that any of this debris making landfall now might not be radioactive? Is there a chance any of this stuff is hot, or is it pretty much washed away over a long trip across the Pacific?
I'm sure some of it will be radioactive. you got to remember that the tsunami knocked out over 100 miles of coast, and the tsunami happened before the meltdown. So a lot of that rubble was heading out to sea before the plants exploded. But the material that was close to Fukushima, within 10 or so miles from Fukushima, maybe even 20, got contaminated, and of course it had a long bath as it worked its way across the Pacific. We had an aircraft carrier 100 miles offshore, and it actually contaminated the deck of the Ronald Reagan 100 miles offshore. So clearly the material got in the ocean. The question is, if almost over a year at sea, it's washed off or not. It started out contaminated, and I'm sure we'll find some in the nooks and crannies of the material when it hits the West Coast.
This is just. I expect if you deign to answer this question, it will be purely conjecture. But just a couple of guys talking here with a few million of our closest friends. Does that seem like a naturally induced tsunami? Because there's if there's one thing I can't stand, it's like it was the Zionists did it. They let off a nuke in the ocean. It's like I don't know if they did or not. I really don't. But it does seem like an earthquake that size would have caused more structural damage to the various man-made structures. So have you given any thought to what actually caused that thing? Does anything about this look funny to you or not really? Is it just a natural disaster and there was a reactor in the way?
Well, I know a bunch of geologists, and the Richter 9 plus was out at sea. By the time it got to the plant, it was about a 7.5, and the plant was designed for a 7.5. So that the earthquake didn't cause these plants to turn into absolute rubble it doesn't surprise me. The real problem is I don't need a conspiracy to leave my head shaken, because we did this to ourselves. There is plenty of evidence on the record that over the last 2,000 years, there's been 4 of these tsunamis of this size that have nailed that part of Japan. We, as a civilization on the planet, the American engineers who built this plant, had ample geologic data to indicate that, hey, every 500-600 years a tsunami of this size hits, and we didn't design against it. So I don't need a conspiracy to get angry at mankind for watching dollars as opposed to watching safety, and I think that's really what happened at Fukushima.
Let me ask you something. Somebody wanted to ask: Are you still active in the design phase of any of the new reactors, or have you shifted out of that?
I'm active on one reactor design, the AP1000, which is the one that's going to be built down in South Carolina. But mainly, I've been paying attention to the old reactors. So we got 100 old reactors in this country that, like me, or should be nearing retirement.
And now, is this new one that you're working on? Is it the 4th generation reactor?
Yeah. It's called AP for Advanced Passive, and it's built by Westinghouse, a U.S. firm, and Toshiba, a Japanese firm. It's interesting because people knew that a loss of off-site power was the most likely cause of an accident, which is what happened at Fukushima. And this plant was built to withstand that. But engineers make trade-offs. So to make a plant that doesn't need electricity, they made a plant that's seismically much weaker than the plants we've got in Japan. So Westinghouse Toshiba will be out there saying that this new design could have withstood the tsunami, and they're right. But the problem is it wouldn't have withstood the earthquake. So in the trade-offs that go into building plants, you pick up some benefit, but you lose some robustness as well.
Worst case scenario, of course, would be if reactor number 4 gets hit with another one. And it's if you look on a little earthquake map, you'll see that there are little rumbles just occurring all the time over there. It's all the time. China syndrome. What is China syndrome?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that worst case scenario.
Yeah. Take them in order.
Yeah, we've had 2 close calls already on the Fukushima Daiichi accident. You recall that the Americans withdrew out beyond 50 miles at the beginning of the accident because they were worried about the Unit 4 fuel pool. But in addition, when the tsunami hit the coast of Japan, it knocked out the diesel generators, not just at Fukushima Daiichi, but at 14 other nuclear plants up and down the coast. So those 14 plants had 37 diesels, 24 of which were knocked out. So we almost had a situation where we had 15 meltdowns and not 3. Some very heroic Japanese men risked their lives to prevent that. So now we're talking about Unit 4 again, because structurally it's weak and it has an enormous amount of radioactive material in it. And, another, Richter 7 or more earthquake will likely either crack that fuel pool or topple the building. In which case, the fuel is hot enough still to burn in air. It can ignite. The metal that the nuclear fuel is made from can ignite. Now, Brookhaven National Labs has done a study that shows that a fuel pool that's a lot less full than Fukushima, in the case of a fuel pool fire, would cause 186,000 fatalities. So we're looking at the possibility. God help us if we have another earthquake. But like you said, it's Japan and it's happening all the time. If they have a Richter 7 or greater, it's likely that we'll get either a damaged pool or a collapsed building. But the Tokyo Electric has acknowledged that the building has a bulge in the side of it as a result of the previous tsunami and earthquake. So it's a weakened building, and we're in a race against time. We either empty that fuel pool as quickly as we possibly can, get it down on the ground as in dry casks before the next earthquake comes.
And back to that China syndrome thing. Is this where the material burns down to the groundwater?
Yeah, the China syndrome happens from the chain reaction is stopped. The nuclear chain reaction stops almost immediately when the nuclear fuel rods come in. But there's all that decay heat from these daughter products. If you don't get a China syndrome in the first month, you're not going to get one. So the plant has been cooled long enough that there's still a lot of heat, but not enough to melt into bedrock.
Okay, good.
Well, the good news is it won't go down. The bad news is it'll go up as flame and smoke. So, but the concept of a molten blob melting into bedrock is behind us. They were and we all knew that in the industry. They were in a race against time, and they were risking workers and pouring salt water on the nuclear reactor when really that's not a good thing to do. But the alternative would be to get that China syndrome that you were just talking about. And that would have been worse than salt water or worker exposures or anything. So,
waiting for me, my lover stands on golden sand.
And welcome back to the last segment of Nuked Radio. I wanted to play a clip from a part of that interview was with this guy, David Bloom, who's an author about renewable energy using foods like potatoes, bananas, cattails, and algae. There's enormous surpluses of waste that could be turned into energy. And instead of playing that, I do want to play Dr. John Apsley, who is also interviewed on this program because he gives an update to the mortality data and talks a little bit about mitigation. And one thing I want people to keep in mind is out of this catastrophe, there are enormous opportunities not only to share with other people, but to create businesses and industry. So think about that, because we're going to talk about it more on Thursday. And I also dropped a link into chat. Again, for this video, Loren had emailed me over the weekend and said, make sure people watch this. This is the Japan journalist that went on the record saying that the earthquake was manufactured, and he gives his evidence for that. She wanted us to pay close attention to that video. And I also dropped the links for the entire Coast to Coast interview, the Potter blog video from last night. And we're going to listen to Dr. John Apsley.
How bad does it have to be before they, I mean, I'm asking you to look in your crystal ball, I know that, but how bad does it have to be before they let us know what's up?
Well, let me answer it this way. Earlier you mentioned the well-done report from the Centers for Disease Control data that revealed that a little over 14,000 people likely died from the radiation fallout in the first 11 weeks after March 18th, when the radiation started landing here. That report has since been updated by the Centers for Disease Control data, because not all areas were reporting. It takes a while, and that's now on up to 22,000. So this is just the first wave. And so there are some people who are obviously affected. A lot of them were children, so the parents were affected, and maybe some of them are asking their question, why did this happen to me? With the cancers that will be coming in prematurely to our children, thyroid cancers and leukemias within the next 5 to 6 years, then I think more parents will be asking that question. One example, in a regularly operating nuclear power plant, there is reliable scientific studies from around the world, from prestigious organizations that are not bought and paid for by industry, that show that for children 5 and under that are living within 5 miles of a normally operating nuclear power plant, that their chances of getting leukemia can be as high as 200% higher than normal. So within that same area, only expanded with women that live there for 10 to 20 years, within 100 miles of a nuclear power plant, initial reports showed that comprises about 18% of American women. This goes back a few decades. But of those 18% of U.S. women, they accounted for 55% of all breast cancer. So then the CDC got involved with that and challenged it and hired their own statistician to come in, epidemiologist, to look at the data. And they threw out arbitrarily a couple of data points, but still it showed that 18% of women were still responsible for over 30% of all breast cancer. So again, I go back to this. We have a lot of toxins in our environment that the National Cancer Institute is saying that is causing up to 90% of our cancers. Radiation just amplifies all that up by at least tenfold. So in my book, I knew that we would be challenged by the individuals that emailed you, and they have every right to be skeptical because
sure they do.
Our politicians are not being honest with them. So I chose to go overboard with references in my book, because the only armor I have is put 800, 900 references in there from the peer review or from authoritative sources. But then again, people have to read the book. So, and there are other authors out there like me that are doing the same thing. Arnie Gundersen is one of the most brave individuals I've met in this industry, in this community rather, because he's really out there on the front lines. He has to speak to perfection on everything that he does anywhere or anything that he writes, because when he gets in front of a deposition and he's under oath, he can be challenged on all these statements that he's made. So he's very, very precise. I've actually never seen him make a mistake or heard him make a mistake. He's just an amazing person. But that's how we have to be. And then slowly, John, we'll get the first adopters, the people that are listening right now attentively, and not to put fear into them, but to put real facts, real educational facts, and then tell them what to do, so then they can implement this in their neighborhoods and in their family.
Well, in your opinion, what should we begin to do? Because I know the West Coast and, all the way up the Pacific Northwest is getting the brunt of this, just from the wind patterns. But the idea is that it infiltrates the food chain. it spreads through all kinds of vehicles, livestock, eating the grass, blowing in the wind, getting into the water, everywhere. So what should we do? I mean, better to prepare and not have a crisis than to have a crisis and not be prepared. It's over with then. So what should we do?
If we can change our lifestyle just slightly to include really delicious smoothies, and that's it, with the right ingredients that are all super-duper nutritious, we can score a big, big gain all the way around, because it doesn't just stop with protecting us from radiation poisoning. That's the first thing. Second thing we can do is to select foods low in the food chain. Delicious tasting foods. Just go to more vegetables and fruits. And that when you get to the animal food, just make sure they're from uncontaminated sources, like I already mentioned. Those are simple things that everyone can do. Like, for example, I buy my cheeses from Europe or from the from the East Coast, and they're delicious. The French cheeses on their western border are completely uncontaminated, and there are many countries in Europe that are that way. So enjoy your pizzas, but make it yourself. And if you live on the West Coast, don't go out and use the local bought stuff. Those are simple things we can do. We can keep a really positive attitude as we educate ourselves that we know what we're doing and that we're making our entire family healthier all the way around. That should give people a level of not only motivation but a sense of accomplishment, that they're really doing something positive for their families. So we can use this crisis and bend it in our favor by just knowing some simple things that we can do.
And now once it gets into your system, I presume there are methods for detoxifying the body. I know that Dr. Teresa Dale will be with us in a little while, and she has some techniques for doing this. And are you aware of some as well?
Yeah, she and I have lectured together, and she's got a great simple product that is able to neutralize a lot of the symptomatology of it. What I'm specializing in complements hers. I specialize in regenerative medicine, but something that can scale and is affordable for everyone. So I like to use whole foods that are known as superfoods. These superfoods, in my definition, actually regenerate the body. They have certain things in them that turn on healing repair at very, very high speeds, or they turn on healing repair that otherwise would not be turned on. So in the case of radiation poisoning at low levels, they just sit in the system and burn and burn and burn 24/7, 365 at such a low level that they're doing damage, but the immune system doesn't recognize that it's there. So by taking things as found in mushrooms and whey products and fruits and vegetables, our immune system wakes up, and it finds these critters in there that aren't supposed to be there, whether it's a germ or whether it's a toxin or whether it's a radioactive particle. The immune system's got to be involved, and it's got to be doing surveillance. And then once it's identified, it grabs it up and takes it out of the body, and we can assist it with these different kinds of nutritional tools. And again, John, it's really easy. Just throw about 4 or 5 things together in a blender, and you're done. And it's good tasting.
Now you realize there's somebody sitting around in a Harley jacket saying, "This guy's got to be kidding me, man. He's telling me I'm going to be de-radioactivized if I just drink a darn smoothie?" And the answer is, yeah.
Yeah, and it's easy. I mean, even if you don't eat breakfast, you can do it for lunch and dinner, and make it chocolate, make it strawberry. Make it so it tastes great, and build out some muscle in the meantime. And in the mid 1990s, when I first looked at what this radioactivity was doing, there was an ongoing cover-up that was much more enormous than what we have going on here, because we have free press and like coast-to-coast radio. But the Soviets at that time out of Chernobyl made it illegal for any reports to come out. So we have a free press that can counter that. But as a result, those whole areas are still devastated today. You can see pictures on the web. It's just they're just devastated if you look, especially in Belarus. And those generations used to have 90% of their children healthy.
Sound Health Options will be doing free voice scans tonight, 3 to 4 Pacific, 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern. Stay informed, mitigate, and stay safe. We will be back on Thursday.